Good afternoon and welcome back, ladies, gents and Pikachus, to another analysis and breakdown of the Quran of the Muslims. So once again we'll be breaking these things down verse by verse, turning those verses into factual logical statements in English so that you and I can understand who or what is Allah Akbar, what does he mean by the contents of these books here, and more importantly for us as non-believers, how does this affect us in our lives today. So before I start, as I always do, I'm going to tell you now. If you have any doubts or questions as to my validity or honesty, please first buy and read one of these, an Arabic Quran, not an English one like this, because they're not the same book, they have different contents. Once you have done that, you will recognise every single word I'm about to say now is 100% true of the words of Allah himself and what Muslims believe today. So, if you've been keeping up with the series, you'll remember we started our work on Al-Ma'idah, the table spread, in which Allah is giving his Muslims the day-to-day instructions which they should follow, leading up to them arriving at the jihad to kill everybody else. And we're also going to discuss today some of the comments left by the angry, pissed off Muslims. So with that in mind, let's carry on. Now, rather than going through verses, which we will carry on doing tomorrow, I thought, let's really take them to task, these pissed off angry Muslims in the comments. So, the main criticism that they have of me, and in fact other people like me who read their book, is that the translation we are using is terrible, it's a bad translation, and that means it's not accurate. So I wanted to attack that. Now, everybody who watches my channel knows the main book that I use is the Mosque Quran, written in Arabic. This is Allah's actual own word, and we know this because Allah even says he only speaks in Arabic. Everything that he has ever said has been said in the Arabic language. And he also says, languages of other cultures and any translative or interpretive work is the work of Satan. He says that himself in here, and in fact in these other copies as well. So we know if you're going to be accurate about translating the Quran and reading the words of Holy Allah, you need to start with this one. Regardless of which translation you end up with or your interpretation, if it is not Arabic, then it is the work of Satan, in Allah's own opinion. So that's why we use this one. So what of the translations then? Well, we have this one. This is a Hafs translation. This is the Hafs Quran translated into English. This is the one most people in Britain end up using, right? So it's quite a lot longer, even though it has much of it removed. Each sentence is a lot longer because they're trying to add their interpretation into this to make you understand it better. However, as Allah correctly predicted, this is not the same as this one. Many parts are changed, and the interpretive stuff that's added changes what the meaning of the passage is actually, the resulting meaning that you get is completely different. So this one's different to this one, but this one is the same as what the guys complaining about my translation are claiming. So actually, the guys claiming that I have used a bad translation and a bad interpretation are infidels in the words of Allah, if they follow this Arabic one, which as we know is the word of Allah. So the guys making the complaints are themselves infidels of Islam, despite the fact that that's the accusation they make of me. And I freely admit, I am an infidel of Allah, I don't believe in Allah, I don't follow his commands. So we know, this is Allah's word, these ones are. But even with these ones, this is the one I was originally using before I recognised how different it was to this one. So this was the one I started with, the Hafs English translation. And then I got hold of this one, which is an Arabic-speaking Egyptian man who is now a Christian. He translated a different version of the Quran into English himself. But this one agrees with this one. So we know these two translations are in fact the same, and neither one of them are the same as the original Arabic. So we've now got two distinct versions of Quran. The original Allah's word, which those guys don't believe, even though they're Muslims, and the two Hafs translation-based English copies, which agree with each other, but disagree with Allah. Then, recently, I got hold of the Tajweed Quran. Now, this is one that I was actually advised by a Muslim to read. He wasn't very kindly and polite to me. He, in fact, said I should have my head cut off, I deserve to die. But he said if I'm reading the Quran, I should use this one. So guess which one I use now? I use the Tajweed Quran, and this is the one I made this morning's video from. But this one agrees with these as well. So all these three English translations here, give or take, give you the same message, which disagrees with Allah. So we know Allah's word is not even followed by the Muslims themselves. And this is the reason we have Sunni, Shia, Alawite and Sufi. We have different versions of Islam running around trying to kill each other. Syria and Iran's Muslims don't like Palestine's Muslims. Palestine's Muslims don't like Saudi Arabian Muslims. Saudi Arabian Muslims don't like British Muslims. And British Muslims don't like any of the other ones. And the reason is because, even though they should be using this one, Allah's actual word in Arabic, which he identifies as being his actual word himself, you know, the one they all like to disagree with and tell me off for having read. But then when we refer to this one says this one's wrong. So in conclusion of this first point, how the translation thing seems to be a problem for many Muslims, they need to specify which book we should be using, because as I said, the first Muslims I spoke to before I started the series 134 episodes ago told me this was the one that Allah's word is written in, and in fact Allah agrees, the Arabic only copy. Then I was told I should be using a Hafs one, translated into English, and they suggested I buy this one, so I bought this one. But then some other Muslims complained, so then I thought, right, I'll get one written by an Egyptian-born, Muslim-speaking guy who is now a Christian, which is this one, the Generous Quran. But they said, no, that guy's biased, don't use that, use the Tajweed. So I got a Tajweed. So now I've got 4 sets of Muslims all telling me my translation's wrong, and by doing that, telling each other their translations are wrong. And then the situation we've ended up with is Muslims against Muslims telling each other they're infidels, and none of them following Allah. So we know the Quran is not perfectly preserved, and it is not the perfectly preserved word of Allah through Muhammad. That would be this one that they all disagree with, apart from the original Muslim who has now disappeared. I haven't heard from him since. He's probably a Christian now. We know this one, written by the Egyptian-born guy who is now a Christian, this is actually the most accurate one to these. This is more accurate than the translation I did. You know, in fact, I refer to this one now rather than my own translation that I did. But they all disagree with that. We know the Hafs version translated into English. Mosques will tell you this is an infidel copy, don't use this, but most British Muslims are using this one. And the Tajweed Quran, which is the one they actually advise me to use, this is the one I'm going to start using now. This one agrees with this one. So what does that demonstrate? It's not perfectly preserved. It isn't just one book, it's several versions with different translations not agreeing with each other. It tells us that there is no reading going on. That is the main point. These Muslims are clearly not reading their own book, or they'd know by telling me this translation's wrong, they're invalidating the one they suggested. So they're just like the flat earthers. They don't read their own doctrines. They rely on their imams to do the preaching. But if they're not agreeing with these, that tells us that the imams are preaching from this one, while telling them to read this one. So we know Islam, through its own adherents, through the behaviours and the statements of its own believers and its imams, is a false doctrine, a brainwashing method, which doesn't have any relation to God whatsoever. We know this because if it did, they'd all have been reading this one. They wouldn't have been reading or needing these ones in the first place. And the last point I'm going to make, they would be rewarding me because I am actually spreading the truth of the Quran as Allah has asked me to do. Whether or not I agree with it doesn't matter. He doesn't say I have to agree with it. He says my job as a human being is to spread the truth of his holy Quran in Arabic, this one. That's exactly what I've been doing. And then just appending at the end by saying it's a load of nonsense that I don't believe. So, that's the end of this short video. I just wanted to let you know, if anyone says to you your translation is wrong, your interpretation is wrong, with concern to reading the Quran, you can then say back to them, okay then, what is the version you are using? because by saying there's different versions, it says it's not perfectly preserved, there is not one and only testament of the Quran, it is not true and accurate of the words of Allah, and they don't all follow it and believe it as Allah has asked them to do. So it proves every single Muslim is an infidel, and that Islam in general is a false religion. And that's the end of this video. So, a short one today, but a sweet one. Hope you enjoyed that and you learned something. God bless you all, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye now.